Alright, time for another draft physics video presentation. I don't know. It's getting a little strange and bizarre, the conversation, and the real problem is that there's not enough evidence in physics. Not enough stuff that's been well established, and then you set up these premises and these rules about how things work where there's some agreement to start with, because it just gets distracted in these bizarre directions. So there's people arguing now that I'm somehow arguing something other than Newton's physics, which it's clearly just Newton in terms of momentum. That's what Newton believed. And you're just basically following objects with energy, transferring their energy to other objects and giving them a portion of their energy based on their velocity and their mass. And that's all they have to exchange is their velocity. The total of their velocity times their mass. The mass is essentially a bucket, and you carry velocity with it. And the volume that you hold in that bucket is what you have as energy to distribute to other objects. Anyway, something like that. A pretty simple notion, and again, I've pointed out the history, and the history is that people objected just for no good reason. Did this MV squared thing that was clearly wrong. Okay, I mean, it got preposterously exaggerated answers, and it wasn't until the 1800s that they put the 1/2 in front of it to make it a little more rational. But it's still highly irrational in circumstances like the bullet, where the gun does a little action this way, and the bullet does 1,000 times more energy coming out the other end of the bullet, which violates Newton's third law, but they don't pay any attention to that. Anyway, so there's this theory, okay, Pyrrho said it, some others have said it, fine, you can propose it as a theory that somehow energy isn't distributed that way, and that there's this 1.4 thing or something. So if something is is twice the mass or half the mass, however you want to look at it, that somehow only 0.7% of the energy can get into the faster object, the lighter object. So if I have a compression on a spring and I shoot objects with the spring, every time I decrease the mass, make it something lighter, it will leave the spring, instead of twice the speed, because I have the mass, it'll leave at 1.4. Now, I've seen no physics professor ever say it. I've seen no demonstration of it. So this challenges all of the conventional physics as far as I can tell. Conventional physics thinks momentum is conserved, and that kinetic energy is the thing that disappears, could be created or destroyed. Clearly I can just play the video of Professor Lewin saying that you can't mess with momentum and that that it's kinetic energy that you can mess with, and the experiments sort of show it. I've showed the experiments where with a spring anyway, I compress a spring and put different weighted objects on the spring. I sort of demonstrated. Professor Lewin's video shows that no matter if I put a one mass object here and a one mass object here between a spring, they both leave at the same speed. And if I put a two mass object here and a one mass object here, this one leaves at half the velocity that this one has. And you could go to 3 mass, you get this, 4 mass. And then I showed with the wooden blocks that, it works that way, up to 4. I 4 times double the mass, and I'm still getting the same thing going this way. The same speed of the other object, whether I pull the spring or I compress the spring. So it seems a pretty well-established fact. And they're arguing that I've created that philosophy or theory. At least this is Stephen Bro's theory, that this is somehow my physics, when clearly it's just established. I have this notion from my experience in life and everything I heard from teachers and physicists that there's nothing special about springs, that they do just compress, that they store the energy, and then they release the energy. And it doesn't matter how fast I compress a spring or how slow I compress it, it's going to do the same thing. It doesn't care. And it also doesn't care about when it's releasing the energy, how heavy the object is. It's going to give whatever it's got. And that's all. And it doesn't waste any of it. It doesn't catch fire. It doesn't get hot. It doesn't get colder. It doesn't do anything to destroy energy, or momentum. So anyway, I can just play the clips of Professor Lewin saying it. Julian Sumner, who physics is my business, says it. The guy at Yale, I can get him saying it. So all these people are saying momentum's conserved, and yet they're saying that no, momentum is not conserved, that kinetic energy is the precious thing and it's conserved. And I'm just saying there's no evidence of it that I can find. And it seems a bizarre turn. I didn't anticipate the counter argument being that conventional physics is wrong. Okay, physics girl is wrong. I mean, in assuming that there's some sort of transfer of the momentum. So apparently this might just be with springs. Okay, so because we have the overt experiments, right? I mean, there's no way of undoing the experiment where you bang the cars, right? Or where you add the extra weight. So I mean, I've shown that experiment. You have a car that's got one mass going down a track at a velocity, and I drop a mass on it it doubles its weight, and the double weight car goes 1/2 the speed away. It's just a fact. Okay, that one's well established. I think so well established that nobody should be arguing it doesn't happen. So this is just about springs then. So springs don't really do what we think they do. What most of us think they do, what all the physicists think they do, that springs have some sort of magical catch to them where they can't deliver the energy they stored. Okay, that's fine. I mean, if that's your theory, just show me the evidence and maybe I'll find it interesting enough to undo all the other evidence I've seen that springs aren't like that. But anyway, it's a bizarre turn. So it comes up in the comments here, and then I'll go to the bro comments. They're just dribbles on and on and on and on. But I mean, it should be counter-argued because he makes an awful lot of accusations that are just plainly insane. I mean, he really is crazy. So he doesn't have Asperger's. He's fucking crazy. So anyway, so Web of Lies, which, is sort of the joke. This is the bad ethics guy who's telling other people they have ethics that are not acceptable. He upgrades his own video. It's just hilarious. These people with no ethics complaining about other people with no ethics. Just too silly. And then his comment is just as ironic. So he said, Newton's cradle all by itself proves you wrong. So I'm defending Newton's physics. Let's understand. Newton did not believe in mv squared. He overtly stated he didn't believe in it. So it was proposed, mv squared was proposed 1 year before Newton published his Principia thing. So clearly, if Newton thought it had some value, it would have been in his Principia thing. And it wasn't. His theory was in it. So the irony is that it's Newton's cradle. It's called Newton's cradle, and he's basically saying Newton didn't understand Newton's cradle, and then didn't know how it worked, and it proved him wrong. Newton's cradle proved Newton wrong. So that should be everybody's understanding. It's named after Newton because it proved Newton wrong, not because it has everything to do with proving Newton right. Oh, okay. So anyway, there's no way to predict how balls behave using momentum. Well, of course there is, but what the trick is that what to make the things out of, and whether there's a spring involved. So the real problem is that it's the elastic inelastic thing. Are you really banging? See, they're calling a spring elastic when clearly it's not hard. It's not immovable. Where some traditional notions of elastic means something like a steel ball. Now, a steel ball and a spring really don't have much in common. So to call both of those things the same kind of interactor is to fundamentally break logic. So part of this is just a vocabulary problem. So it's really hard to predict for different things. So if I put compressed air in a ping pong ball, it behaves one way. I don't have compressed air in the ping pong ball, it behaves another way, right? So that's the part that screws up prediction, is you can't just say the mass doesn't matter what form the mass is in. Clearly, if the mass can absorb energy, that is, it can deform and then re-expand to its original condition, then it's essentially a spring, and then the results are going to be very different. So that's the key to understanding. But there's no obstacle preventing momentum from explaining. Descartes did a lot of explaining with things like billiard balls and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, in terms of, hard objects hitting each other. And there was nothing wrong with much of what he predicted using momentum. So this is just a silly statement, I think. Historically inaccurate. Okay, and then he just says, end of fucking story. So we have no evidence that Newton didn't understand Newton's cradle. There's no evidence that Newton's cradle isn't an example of transfer of momentum. So we don't have anything. All right, and then he comments to his own comment, I suppose. You said balls. That's really clever. So, I mean, the audience really, the first indignity of being on the internet is the indignity of having to suffer interaction with humans. I mean, this is their character. They can't do better than this. Ugh, it's pathetic. All right. So I say, just too ironic that it's called Newton's cradle. Yet you don't think Newton understood how it works, and you think Newton's momentum math got wrong answers. So again, Newton predicted a lot of the behavior that we see in the world accurately. The whole Halley's Comet thing, blah 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 blah. So some of the Newton's predictions we see every day. Some of Newton's predictions, yes, we only hear about, but they're all, it's pretty solid. Nobody debunked him in any kind of real way. We don't have any debunk demonstrating demonstrating how Newton's concept was inaccurate. So that's all I'm saying, is that you proposed a kinetic energy theory without explaining how the existing theory was really rotten. Anyway, yes, it's a word in the English language. I have several books on the subject if you need to borrow one. I'm guessing you do. Yeah, you can't even give the title of the book. I could just look it up, shithead. I mean, fuckhead. I mean, moron. So anyway, whatever this is, the Honest Sea Gaming. So another word, honest in here, lies. They're all playing with these words that they're, massacring. I mean, these are, child molesters for procreation kind of things. It's whatever. Pro-life child molesters. Gary, I responded, but once again, does not appear when I go incognito due to your censorship. So again, I didn't censor anything, so it's just more bullshit. It's another lie, so fuck you, it's a lie. The problem with YouTube comments is known by everybody who's on the internet, so I don't know why you can't figure it out. If you're going to continue allowing people to block for you, you're going to allow Google to block for you. Don't pretend you care about dialogue. Well, you're blocked now, because what the fuck? You have no right to make these accusations. Okay, you don't understand how the system works. I'm sorry for you, but fuck this bullshit. I don't have any obligation to keep defending myself against your lies. Okay. So if you can't make anything called an honest argument, then go fuck yourself. All right. I wish there was some, like I said, he could have just linked to his book titles, right? He could have just told us, well, what's the great book title that explains how Newton was an idiot? Anyway, first of all, you have never actually seen Newton's math get the right answers. I don't have to see it, obviously. It's the whole reason why it's legendary is because nobody's been able to, poke any holes in it, moron. Only heard about it getting right answers. So we think it's some kind of conspiracy theory. What's your theory? You all prove Newton wrong, but you don't want to show us your proof? That sounds like flat earth crap, frankly. Second, this is an appeal to authority fallacy. So there's no appeal to authority. I've seen Newton's cradle, so it works perfect to me. I perfectly understand how momentum completely explains every little bit of it. So explain to me where I've misinterpreted the Newton cradle, where it shows kinetic energy at work, because I don't see it anywhere, frankly. Third, the momentum equation doesn't give wrong answers. It clearly gives different answers. Now, one of them has to be the right answer and one of them has to be the wrong answer. Your kinetic energy says a certain number of joules. Newton's momentum theory says a certain number of joules. I mean, it can be converted. A Newton can be converted into joules. So this is just baby talk to sit there and pretend they're not both real measures of real energy. They're both saying there's a certain quantity of capacity to move things that they carry, and they give different answers. You can't give a different answer and say your different answer is right without saying the other answer is wrong. That's not possible logically. Alright, that is not the claim being made. It's overtly the claim being made. So it's, again, too silly, right? I mean, do you morons not really understand there's two different definitions of energy? MV and 1/2 mv squared. They're competing definitions of a physical universe. One where something's carrying the 1/2 mv squared worth of capacity to move things, and one where it's only carrying the mv. I mean, it's not a straw man to point out that's the overt controversy. I don't understand how you don't understand that those two universes can't be one universe. They can't be. It's impossible. You use one formula to navigate space, you'll navigate it entirely different than if you navigate with the other formula. They're not compatible notions of reality. Alright, I claim that the momentum equation cannot answer how the balls move after the impact. So we've already done this before. Neither can the kinetic energy formula. So this is, again, irrelevant to whether there is such a thing as kinetic energy. You're claiming there is. I see no evidence that there is. Okay, and is therefore incomplete. Well, it's not supposed to. It's not incomplete because it doesn't. Its obligation is not to explain what a tennis ball does versus what a wrecking ball does, because they're different things. Anyway, you believe Newton's explanations were incomplete. So again, I don't know what you're saying. I'm saying that Newton overtly told you his explanations were incomplete because he didn't know what the forces were. He doesn't know what the stuff is. He didn't know the nature of energy. Okay, he just knew that objects carry it. Otherwise, you never would have made this channel or your website. So again, it's being incomplete doesn't mean something's wrong. So again, there's nothing wrong with Newton's gravity theory. It's clearly incomplete in the sense that he didn't say it's like rain. Okay, so in that sense, he's not getting it. But there's nothing wrong with the inverse square law that he, like I said, the fact that Newton put together all the little pieces that other people had observed previously is just a fact. That's what Newton did. And there's nothing wrong with those statements about the general rules. I've already just pointed out how, the second and the third law are kind of looking at it the wrong way. There's no equal and opposite reaction. There's just you giving your momentum to something. And when you give your money away, that makes you money poor. Fact. Just giving it away changes you, too. So there's no need for an opposite reaction. There's just the action of giving it away. All right. So that was just stupid. too stupid. So we'll just, be done with Web of Lies. Too fucking trolly, of course. Alright, so this, I don't even know what this is. CRB Vegas. They don't have any videos. Hey, in Mendham, Zohar came into our stream today and we discussed your physics theory for at least 3 hours or so, blah, blah, blah. The video should be uploaded tonight. Well, it's not. Where's it uploaded to? What the fuck are you talking about? Who cares? I don't know. Well, whatever. This was just absolute nonsense by a lunatic. The free energy crap. So, Matt or Dirk, I don't know what to say. He's he doesn't know enough physics to, and then this free energy thing. He basically, he says something here. I want to believe both are possible. Both forms of free energy. Obviously, the Professor Lewin version of the free energy thing, the one created by this new phenomenon, okay? So, this to me is still incredibly curious. So, you have an object with a certain mass, and you put springs on them. And you bang them into another object. An object weighs twice as much. So, you bang it into an object that weighs twice as much, and the heavy object moves off with 2/3 of the original velocity, which means it gained momentum, which should be impossible, right? I mean, that shouldn't be possible, so that seems like free energy there. Anytime you're gaining momentum, that's pretty significant. So yeah, springs they have a nuance I didn't know about. I didn't know a spring could do that, frankly. And so it basically is saying to you that somehow when the spring is compressed, it's compressed for free. The energy goes through the spring. It compresses the spring, but it's still going through the spring. So you got the spring compression for free. And that is interesting. It doesn't have too much to do with this controversy between kinetic energy and momentum, but it has a lot to do with a conversation about how you can perhaps multiply energy, and that really shouldn't be possible. But anyway, there's no denying the experiment, so it does open a door that needs more experiments. All right, or whatever. Or do you mean mega power corporations have enough money to at least give some people literal free energy? Whatever all this, all these businesses have to make money. They're selling a product, blah, 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 blah. You'll have some conspiracy theory, blah, 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 blah. It's just too stupid. So anyway, I just point out that we already have pretty cheap energy. And, the problem is there's lots of places to get free energy, like nuclear and such. But they have side effects that are expensive, so that's the problem. There's lots of available energy. It's just that there's the side effects of the problem. All right, anyway. So this was the interesting one. So the Aerosoap Breeze says, I would like to try to put together a test for my own curiosity. If you could describe accurately the experiment you would like to see, I can try to make something. So he's not a professional scientist at an institute, but he's a metal fabricator, blah, blah, blah. So that's, pretty much all we need is somebody who can, put together the mechanical objects in the right configuration. So Web of Lies posts, an object of mass m is launched on a track with a spring depressed a fixed distance x. So you just compress a spring the same amount. Then an object of 2m is launched with the exact same way. Yeah, and maybe 1/2 m too. So let's do twice as heavy and twice as light and see what happens. The KE and PE formula predicts the mass m object has 1.4 the velocity and 7 times the momentum, and 0.7 times the momentum. So, this is, you're saying what? Well, who says that? So I've never seen that ever, and by any physics lecturer. So no professor, nobody, none of the videos online. There's not a single one of them I've seen that talk about, Khan Academy, anywhere you go, that talk about this 1.4 phenomenon. I've never seen it until I made these videos, and you people started saying, people like Piro started saying it. So where are you getting it from? Because I can't find it on the internet. I type in 1.4 and I type in 0.7 in physics and momentum. And I don't get any references to any papers or anything at all where they explain this 1.4 thing. So it's kind of an amazing proposal you're making here. You're saying all of physics doesn't understand that this is what springs do. Apparently, just springs do it. Okay, so anyway, so I've already shown evidence that certainly indicates that isn't true, right? We didn't have the complete experiment where they actually have the spring on a brick wall and compress it and then shoot objects with one solid weight, right? We've seen the other experiment where the masses are changed. But the results clearly indicate Newton's third law works, in that the same energy goes this way that goes that way. But anyway, so that's the experiment you should try. Don't bother with any of Gary's rigged quote mind experiments. I don't understand. So in some way I've rigged experiments, or I've quote mined experiments by just saying, let's do the experiment. And where have I shown any opposition to any of this? I would love you to, yes, go ahead, show me this 1.4 times experiment. So this is exactly an experiment I've already described as a good experiment to do, right? I mean, yeah. Where did I say don't do the experiment where you put half the mass on and see that it goes twice as fast or twice as slow, based on how much that it's proportional, that momentum is conserved? Where did I say don't do the momentum is conserved experiment? Oh, that's right. I never said any such thing. Of course, go ahead. Yes, please show me this experiment. And then we can all go, okay, on Professor Sumner's, he's dead, but, we can go harass the dead guy's videos. And we can go on Professor Lewin's, and we can go on all the videos on the internet and explain to them Physics Girl and tell them all how they all are so wrong and they don't know anything about physics because they don't even get this obvious thing that springs don't work that way. Just amazing, frankly. Anyway, I mean, this is amazingly stupid crap that you can't even get them to agree with something that's already so well established. But anyway, let's just pretend, okay, that yes, physics didn't realize springs have this catch to them. Okay. I would like to try to put together a test for my own curiosity. Okay, I'm reading his. So I said, excellent. I'll give this some thought regarding the kind of mechanism that would be adaptable to the most variety of experiments. And the point would be is to create some kind of mechanical device where we can do lots of different experiments. Test lots of different things. See, the problem with air tracks is, right, you have to make the mass bigger, you have to make it larger. To increase the mass, you have to increase the size of the object on the track, and so that makes it a little complicated. Different things have their liabilities, so it's finding a mechanism that has the fewest liabilities and provides the most options. Let's see. To eliminate friction, probably best just to drop things. So I'm sort of arguing that instead of air tracks, maybe we should just use air itself. But then we get into the gravity being, people end up having arguments about what gravity's doing, and velocity and all that. But whatever. So I add to that. The priority would be to get accurate measurements of velocity. So I sort of asked, do you have an HD camera, something that might be able to do 60 frames per second, so we can video at this stuff, or at least maybe a strobe. So I actually have a strobe light device capable of strobing anyway, and so I was thinking of maybe doing that. So, because then you can get a lot of frames in one image and do accurate measurements. So that might be a good way to measure velocity. Even better than the video would be to, strobe images. But anyway. I thought there was another counter thing. Well, anyway, that's the experiment you should try. So I said, I agree. That would be a good experiment to do. Because obviously you're arguing something I've never heard of, and why not go ahead and see if it's true? I certainly see no chance of the results being what you anticipate. I mean, I just can't see how all of these other experiments could be so distorted in what they're presenting as a view, and that all these professors are wrong about something so basic. So when I point out, I can't find any physics professor teaching the 1.4 theory. Can you cite any source for this theory besides some troll says so? So, there's no response to this comment. So then he says, don't bother with any of Gary's rigged experiments. How have I rigged or quote mined any experiments? What experiment haven't I shown that you think I should show? So I've been begging for facts, begging for theory. Link me to the video that's explaining it correctly. Show me this video that I should appreciate that they've shown something. Physics girl said, we completely transferred 100% of the momentum, yet we also create a bunch of heat and a bunch of, deformation and a bunch of other stuff moving. Yeah, that doesn't really work. All right, so I guess we'll go to the Stephen Bro pile of shit lies, just lie after lie after lie, like somehow I have rigged something, that somehow there's something dishonest in any of these videos where I'm attempting to do anything but have an honest argument. It's just such a pile of shit, and it's just so it's evil, that people do this lying on the internet thing, and it's just so bad. Just completely made up bullshit. Anyway, so I'll pause and go find Steve's crud comments. Alright, maybe we'll play this other example of the cart experiment done in a different way. So there's a compressed spring between two carts. The red car weighs twice as much as the blue car. And, they just release the spring, and the blue car travels twice the distance the red car travels to hit a stop, and that's how they did it. So instead of measuring the absolute velocities, they just measure the distances that they travel, and it works out the same way. It's basically just telling you that yes, twice the velocity goes one way, half the velocity goes the other way, because it's completely, momentum is conserved. So Stephen would argue that this shouldn't be possible, because the spring should have some sort of problem pushing the lighter car twice as fast as the slower car.
The trolleys of equal mass accelerate at the same rate when the same force is exerted on them. That is what Newton's second law tells us.
So, the two trolleys will have the same final velocity as they travel down the track in opposite directions.
So this is
they
two of the
hit the
same.
barrier at the same time, if they travel the same distance.
So we position the two trolleys of equal mass in the center of the track. Measure the distance from the front of each.
Okay, so you get it. So when they're the same weight, they both leave at the same velocity, they hit the barriers at the same time. So let's go to the not the same. So it's double the mass now, and so now they have to position it 1/3 down the track, because obviously the idea would be these are just units of distance. So the red car will travel 1 unit of distance, the blue car will travel 2 units of distance, double the distance, meaning half the velocity.
Because half the distance of that the blue trolley covers in the same time.
We need to divide the track into thirds. The trolley of the greater mass will travel 1/3 of the track, while...
See, this sort of confuses things, because then people start thinking about 1/3, and that's not half. 1/3 means as a unit. okay, 1/3 is 1 unit, when the 2/3 on the other side of the whole, would have 2 1/3. So there's 2 1/3 on one side and 1 1/3 on the other side, so it's half.
The trolley of the lesser mass will cover 2/3 of the track, so that they both hit their stoppers at the same time.
So I'm just saying that this, it sort of gives you an impression, well, that doesn't look like it twice. No. So it just means that one car will go twice the distance in the same amount of time. The other car goes 1 unit of distance.
Right, let's position the trolleys more carefully. Measure their distance from their stoppers. Remember that the distance of the trolley must be half as much as the distance of the blue trolley for this to work out.
Yes, just be sure you have your left shoe on your left foot and your right shoe.
The mass of the red trolley is 500 grams, and that of the blue trolley is 250 grams. The distance of the red trolley from its...
Sorry, I thought they'd get to this. I just didn't know they did all this blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's a little bit too grammar schooly. Oh, this is after. It already happened. Missed it. That should be it.
Remember that the distance of the trolley must be half as much as the distance of the blue trolley for this to work out.
The mass of the red trolley
sorry.
is 500 grams,
Shit.
and that of the blue trolley is 250 grams. The distance of the red trolley from its stopper is 42 centimeters. The distance of the blue trolley from its stopper...
So 4284, double. Okay, so even though he's talking 1/3, it's double. Okay.
stopper is 84 centimeters.
There you go.
Perfect. They hit their stoppers simultaneously at exactly the same time. Now we will try one trolley with 3 times the mass of the other. Where should we position the trolleys at the start?
Applying the principle of conservation of momentum, we know that the initial linear momentum of the system is equal to its final momentum. Therefore,
Which is, to me, the stupid way to say it, but clearly conservation of momentum. So there's no way to get around it. Half is going to go one way, half is going to go the other way. So 3 times means it goes 1/3, as fast. So you just do the same kind of calculating, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if we need to play all of this either. So we'll just move up to the experiment where they move the trolleys to the proper location.
The distance covered by the red trolley is 1/3 of the distance covered by the blue trolley in the same amount of time. This time, we divide the track into 4 equal parts.
the red trolley must travel 1/4 of the track, and the blue trolley...
See, again, they just make it a little bit more complicated. So it's 1 unit of distance, and the other one will travel 3 units of distance because it's it's 3 times the weight. So it's 3 units of distance because it's going 3 times slower. You see. So one car will go 1 unit of distance in the same time the other car goes 3 units of distance.
travels 3/4 in the same length of time. Position the 2 trolleys at 1/4 of the length of the track, with the red trolley having the least distance to travel.
So 3 times the mass, goes this little distance. 1 unit of mass goes the entire 3 units of distance. So complete inverse relationship. Clearly the spring is doing the right thing here. It's not doing 1.4 in any direction or any of this crap. So no apparent evidence of the 1.4 theory here. And the theory is basically telling you kind of overtly the spring is producing the same energy each time. So clearly the blue car each time is moving the same velocity. So whether there was just 1 unit of mass on the other side, or 2 units of mass on the other side, or 3 units of mass on the other side, it didn't matter to the blue car. The blue car went the same velocity each time. So one could extrapolate logically that if it doesn't matter whether it's double or 3 times, then it's not going to matter whether it's 10 times the mass, and it's not going to matter whether it's 400 times the mass, and it's not going to matter whether it's a brick wall. If it's a brick wall, the blue car is still leaving at the same speed. Logically, we shouldn't have to do any more than just what we just did here. Now again, the Professor Lewin experiment showing the extra momentum, it's a moving spring, which is a different argument. But anyway, so, alright, so now we'll do the comments. Alright, so the Aero Soap Breeze guy comments on Stephen Bro's video. And I don't know why he doesn't respond to Stephen's comment just by saying something like, "Are you fucking insane?" Ask a simple question, get an insane answer. I mean, I don't know what else to say about this. Can you please explain why you claim the spring is a cheat exactly? So Stephen says cheat right over the experiment. All this crap. Gary's cheat. Because Gary thinks springs work. Oh, okay. So Gary's cheating somehow because he thinks springs work. Okay, I don't understand what you mean when you're saying the spring can't necessarily accelerate objects fairly. So clearly that's the argument. Springs are broken. The heavier the object you put... See, there's no way to make sense out of it because you go heavier, it's broken, lighter. The 1.4 thing, it has to work both directions. So it gets... It creates insane amounts of loss of energy. The spring is being so ineffective. So if you start with something really tiny, by the time you get to big things, you have zero energy left because you've already lost it by increasing the mass of things. And anyway, at 1.4, every doubling of the mass. All right, I don't understand what you mean. All right, yeah, can't objects. Why does the spring lack the ability to accelerate the half-weight object to 2 times the velocity if the energy in the spring is constant? So he doesn't answer any of these questions, I mean, as they're explicitly stated. Say if I have a setup such as this, spring 1 loaded with initial energy we will impart. So you compress a spring a specific amount. It's a dart gun or something. Object transfers the energy after traveling some distance. Spring 2 collects the energy of the measurement. So that's basically the experiment Steve calls a cheat. Right. With the only variable being the object's weight, I don't understand why that's not considered fair. Yeah, I don't understand either. Seems a fair experiment. So all this he types, and there won't really be an explanation. There'll just be a bunch of lies. Okay. I've liked and hearted your comment, and will probably pin it shortly, because I genuinely appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. This is so ridiculous. Especially as I see you just volunteer to take on some experimental work for Gary. Well, he didn't really say he's doing it for me. I mean, he's has his own honest curiosity, it would appear. So again, this is somehow my problem. I mean, I'm actually willing to pay somebody. He doesn't want it necessarily, he doesn't want to need to be paid to do it. Okay, but the point is that the object is to get the experiment done well. All of us should want that. And if somebody has the ability to do it well, then they should do it well. Yes, that'd be really great. That's where I started out 4 years ago. Well, clearly it's not where you started out. Okay, so that we all know that now. That clearly you didn't start out with some sort of open mind. You claim it, but you don't have that. You have an inner deep need to believe in some other kind of wooey physics. That's clear. Volunteering to test out Gary's radar interference claims. So he didn't volunteer to do anything in the sense that he volunteered to go on his own tangents. Okay, and that some of the experiments might have some parallel use, but he wouldn't do anything as I instructed anything. So nothing, you didn't get my opinion or my guidance regarding any decision about any experiment. So let's just understand, he bought his equipment, he bought this stuff, he bought that stuff, didn't say a damn thing to me about any of that. Those were all his decisions. Also, coincidentally, that was in relation to Gary's misunderstanding of another Walter Lewin MIT experiment. So this is an allusion to this fact that I misunderstood something, that he's never demonstrated I misunderstood anything. Beyond the fact that, yes, I would still claim it deceives people to use an audio tone on the radar experiment. You should actually detect the actual microwaves, not whether or not you can receive a signal placed on top of the microwaves. But anyway, clearly the demodulation amplifies the signal. So that's another catch to why the experiment looks the way it does, is because you are essentially amplifying the signal, okay? And so that's why it appears to be twice the amplitude in certain circumstances when it's not really, because that's just a byproduct of the demodulation. Anyway, but not wanting to get distracted from what you wanted to discuss, I may return to that if you have interest in a particular topic too. So yes, well, obviously I'm going to get returned to it, and I'm going to keep arguing that you still haven't understood what the whole point was to do, was to create an experiment that would demonstrate that any interference in space was completely not possible, that it doesn't have anything to do with the results of the experiment, that even if you're going to argue for a wave theory of interference, the interference has to be taking place on the surface. It can't possibly be taking place in the space that the waves are traveling through. But you never understood that from the beginning, you retard. All right, so forgive me if I first rush through an answer and then add to it in as much detail as you might want. So how can you add any detail when you know nothing about any of the theory? Yeah, you're theoretically completely ignorant, and yet he can add all the detail you want. A little later today, because I'm supposed to be somewhere else right now, and apparently he hasn't seen all of the videos that demonstrate all the professors, and not one of them arguing for the 1.4 theory. So he has never... the allergy thing again. Anyway, morning runs are a problem. Anyway, so he says, I'm supposed to be somewhere else right now. I don't want to let a friend down. He has to go pick up something for somebody, no doubt. In fairness, I think I need to finally upload at least a clip of the new evidence, which is far clearer that Gary's basic claim about this 2x velocity thing simply does not happen in reality. So again, let's understand, it's not Gary's claim. It's every physicist's claim. Every physicist I've ever seen's claim. I think it would be Veritasium's claim. It would be Physics Girl's claim. It would be AB Science's claim. It would be Baldy Katz's claim. So every person that I have had any argument with, all of those people would argue that yes, the momentum is conserved. The only person I've heard, a physical person in a video, so besides little trolly comments, the only person I've seen say it is Piro. So besides Piro saying it, I haven't never seen it said by anybody who has any interest in the subject of physics. There's not a single video that I know of. So can somebody link me to a video where somebody is proposing the 1.4 theory? The theory that a spring can only give a heavier object 1.4 of the velocity, the lighter object, sorry, only gets 1.4 an increase in its velocity when it leaves a spring. Like I said, it's paradoxical on its face, because if you go the other way, like I said, you have no energy left. It can't make any sense. It has an infinity problem and a origin problem, where depending on how small an object I start with, I will have 0 energy left by the time I get to the heavier objects. Anyway, Gary's basic claim about 2x velocity thing simply does not happen in reality. So in spite of what the experiments indicate, and in spite of the fact that I have absolutely no evidence, I can find no. I've looked for it. I can't even find it. Okay, certainly Stephen's not going to show us the previous experiments done to demonstrate this. So again, he's arguing with conventional physics here. He's not arguing with Gary's claim. He's arguing with Professor Lewin's claim. And let's see, when he presents his great evidence, his proof that this 1.4 thing happens, will he have the courage to now go on all of these channels for all of these physicists and tell them they are wrong and that they're teaching it wrong? Will he have the courage to do that? If you press me, I will let you see that. Perhaps I can let you see it privately, ? With a smile. What is this all about? I mean, what is this nonsense of he can't release his evidence? Why? Because he hasn't put a laugh track on it yet? I mean, what is he waiting for? Oh, it's just so fucking silly. So very quickly, my reasoning, he doesn't have any reasoning here. His reasoning is he hates Gary and he's going to try to do whatever he can to slander me. And that's it. It's mainly based on practical demonstrations rather than me following any theory to the letter. Well, that's probably true for every fucking one of us. So again, this claim that somehow we all don't want to see the experiment. Of course we do. I want to see the editing experiment repeated. Don't you? Oh no, you're all afraid of that happening somehow. Wait, anyway. Oh, and please remember that when I started out testing all this, I honestly did not know whether Gary was correct or not. So he puts this in capitals. I was in some doubt. And so he still isn't, but he's not in any doubt now. And again, this doesn't have anything to do with my claims about kinetic energy. Let's understand. It doesn't change the train scenario. There's no spring involved. It doesn't change all the circumstances where I've shown kinetic energy creates paradoxes. This doesn't fix the spaceship problem at all. This doesn't make the bullet, the dime leaving the spaceship at 1,000 miles an hour being 2,000 times more, and 1,000 times more energy than a 2 kilograms going 1 mile an hour. It doesn't change any of this. So this clarifies absolutely nothing on the subject of kinetic energy, except the one nuance of what do springs do. Because we already have clear evidence that trains don't do it. Okay, unless you put springs on them. Well, I mean, trains with springs don't do it. We've already seen that. So I'm just saying, boy, just an amazing fucktard. And I mean, he's just such a fucktard. All right, the work I did convinced me Gary was simply wrong. So again, you keep saying Gary was wrong. No, you're saying Newton is wrong. You're saying Lewin is wrong. You're saying physics. So you're saying everyone is wrong except you and Piro. That's what you're saying, and a troll. Okay. And that in all likelihood he knew he was wrong. So again, he thinks there is some possibility. I mean, I just, there's no point in me even arguing it, is there? I would invest all this time in all this aggravation and do all of this because I knew I'm wrong? Oh, I mean, that's just so pathetic. Because he too had tested. So again, he says these things as if I, would sit there and think, yeah, I'll roll this. This battery's round. I'll roll it down the table. Oh yeah, it rolled, like 20 miles an hour. Yeah, I'm going to do that experiment. Anyway, but perhaps figured out no one else had bothered, so he could make it into a bet he was guaranteed to win. The whole point of the bet was to demonstrate my conviction, you idiot. The whole argument was, I'm so certain I'm right, okay, that I don't have this counter evidence. proving me wrong, that I'm willing to put up real skin. And I just was saying, if you people are so confident you're telling me I'm wrong, and you're so confident, why aren't you willing to bet on it too then? It should be easy money for you. And then I doubled the odds. I said, I'll give you 2-to-1 odds. All right, you get twice as much back. If you're right and I'm wrong. I pay twice as high a penalty for being wrong. And what did I argue the money was to be used for? If I made any money? To do the experiment, you stupid fuck. So, I mean, what a lying sack of shit. So as long as he could convince everyone, including yourself, by the sound of things. So again, he's insulting a person who asked him to answer a question. A sincere question. You're arguing that it's a cheat to use a spring. Why are springs cheating? See, I could explain why clay is cheating. I can explain why gluey staples is cheating. Okay, but he won't explain to us why the spring doesn't work. That's the promise. That the premise was correct. That merely having the mass. So again, this isn't my theory. I didn't invent the half the mass, twice the velocity theory. That's not my invention. I've been duped by physics just like all the rest of the people. I've been duped by them. Okay, I didn't invent this theory, you lunatic. Okay, merely having the mass of an object necessarily made it go 2x faster. Well, it's clearly obvious that it's true in the sense that the experiments are demonstrative, in the sense that you drop the weight on the car moves 1/2 the speed. It's clear. Now, obviously, you can't do it the opposite way, because if you pick up a mass off something heavier, you're also picking up its motion. So you'd have to extract the motion, which means you'd have to remove the motion by giving the car more turn, by having the object stop moving. So in a sense, you could roll it off and then push the car faster. But you have to take the mass off with no momentum, leaving the momentum in the car, restoring it back to the car. But anyway, clearly it works in the one direction. If you drop weights on cars, they will clearly demonstrate that they now will go half the speed. Clearly demonstrated. So this part, you're not going to be able to undo, Steve. You have no chance, frankly. It does not happen. It does not happen. It does not happen. So he just keeps saying this as if he... And so he's shown nothing, and he's making this bold claim. So this is just bold talk from from Gumby. I can't show it not happening. I can show it not happening, measured down to the 1,000th of a second. Whatever. KE theory says it will go to 1.414 faster. So again, square root of 2. And where is that theory proposed? So he says it. KE theory says. Where does it say it? What professor says it? What teacher of physics says it? Who on the internet says it? So who besides Pirro and Farley, who has said it? Because I haven't heard it come from anyone else. It's just so bizarre. So he says there's KE theory that says it. Where does it say it? Is there a paper written somewhere that explains the 1.4 theory? Because I can't find it. Anyway. But in practice, using low friction carts, and later I will use an air track, it always measures between 1.27 and 0.3 times faster. So that's what he's got as a result. So he didn't even get it to match the right result. He's still 10% off or whatever. But whatever. The discrepancy, presumably because my tests were not done in space, a vacuum. You don't need a vacuum. Frankly, because the air resistance is so minor that it's a fraction of the energy in the carts is absorbed by the atmosphere. My trolley carts were hardly aerodynamic. again, you lose more to the wheels, the bearings, than you're going to be losing to air resistance. So he doesn't even understand that part of it. But frankly, so he didn't even get the right answer. His experiment much further off than Professor Lewin's would indicate air resistance is possible to absorb. So clearly, Lewin didn't eliminate air resistance, and his cart only lost 2 milliseconds. 2 milliseconds difference in the velocities before and after. So the air only absorbed 2.02% of the energy. The fundamental problem is this: when the experiment is done far better, so he says far better, so he's done it far better. And yes, I do have such an experiment done with low friction trolley cars, brand new aircraft grade springs, employing electronic timing. So this is probably what he fucked up, is his timer. Who knows? To measure velocities to thousandths of a second and send dozens of consecutive runs. So who knows what he spent for all this stuff. So who knows where, I don't know where he gets his money. But anyway, continuously recorded. So he's probably still recording it with the shittiest camera on earth. So that's the ironic, funny part. But anyway, continuously recorded to avoid further false allegations that I cherry-picked or cheated. The argument was that you did the experiments horribly. Yes. Okay. Now, I don't know if I argued. I'm certainly arguing that you're cherry-picking in the sense that you didn't do the experiments in a range of different ways and show us all the range of different ways you could do the experiment. So none of that. You just wasted our time with your antics and your bullshit instead of actually showing experiments. All right. Documented in every way I could. That's what it should be. Think of remembering that just like you, I am a skilled tradesman. Not a scientist. You're an asshole, is what you are. So and a liar, a slandering liar, and an asshole. So you'd like, I am capable of high quality work, just a joke, where funding and facilities are available to me. So you clearly found the funding for your cars and your tracks and getting your air track, but I sometimes have to employ workarounds. I will soon have air tracks, incidentally. So what do you need them for if you already got this great piece of evidence? But anyway, sorry, that sentence got out of control. I'll start it again. So it's just too funny. All right, so now we're getting to the real answer. Okay, the fundamental problem is this. When the experiment is done far better, it is then measurable, accurately measurable, that Gary's fundamental claim, so again, it's Professor Lewin's claim, that half the mass going 2x the velocity is simply wrong. So again, Professor Lewin says the momentum has to be conserved. Professor Lewin says it's an inverse formula. V m versus, V plus V times mass over, and V plus mass in the denominator, well, whatever. That it's an obligation of the system that springs don't lose the energy, that they work. That's his argument, all right? It's Professor Lewin's argument, not my argument. All right, too stupid. Anyway, Gary's false claim is that the red object in the poor experiment I tagged on the end of my last video. So he thinks that experiment's poor by comparison to his other shit experiments. So his other experiments were so shitty, and yet there's no, obviously the poor experiment actually had a ruler in it. It actually had some appearance of being a better experiment. And he's claiming it sucked. So now he's admitting his experiments sucked. He's basically telling us all they sucked. Okay. Was meant, according to the kinetic energy, to go 2x the velocity when launched by the same force, the same spring. So he's, again, just contending, because I say it, what other physics professors all say, that somehow I invented the theory. I didn't invent the theory, Stephen. Okay, this is an established theory that was established by, who knows how many numerous different kinds of experiments that gave the indication of it. And I've shown the ones I could find. You say there's something wrong with all those experiments. Okay, explain to me what they did wrong. Anyway, the purpose of that experiment, which I could have explained better, had I foreseen how confused everybody would be by the absolute everything Gary intentionally misdescribed, even the lever. So that's just horseshit. There was nothing to describe except a bunch of broken, disconnected pieces of nonsense in your video. And certainly I did more than one description as I found out how you did things. So there was no effort to misdescribe your crap. It was undescribable because you had provided zero information about what you were doing. So I had to guess. And with time, I started guessing better and better. Then that's all I could do. But there was nothing dishonest on my part, you fucking little troll. Anyway, was to show that Gary's claim of what KE theory says will happen to the red object leaving the launching spring simply does not happen. So again, he just keeps saying it doesn't happen. Okay, so doubling the mass doesn't have the velocity. He's saying it. It's his theory. And it's no physicist's theory. Let's just understand. It's his and his alone. Him and Puro. Okay. Does not go 2x the velocity. Therefore, it cannot possibly be expected to compress the receiver spring with extra energy. There's no extra energy. But anyway, it's the same amount of energy is the argument, jackass. You're saying it's got less momentum than it's, that's all there is momentum. Well, frankly, it does not have. Okay, never did except in Gary's intentional misdescription of it. So because the kinetic energy theory says heavy things have less energy than light things, he's breaking momentum to force the kinetic energy to be correct. And again, the experiment showed, he's saying that the spring not only can't produce the momentum, it can't show you the actual momentum, it also can't receive actual momentum, right? I'll have to think about what the receiving, if it's receiving it as the same momentum, that is the same amount of energy, the same compression of the spring. And he's saying, but it's not going twice the speed to the lighter object doesn't have to go twice the speed to compress the spring, okay, the same amount. So even though it weighs half as much, so if a meteor weighs half as much and hits the Earth, it, it only has 1.4 times the energy. Oh, I have to think through. Anyway, convoluted. Forget about it. I'm just saying that there's no way to make sense out of it, right? Because you're we'll do this thing. Okay. All right, so they leave the spring. All right, so it's the same spring compression. I have a one mass object and I have a two mass object. Okay. They leave the spring. Yes, the intuition is that this object has twice the velocity. So that's what all the professors in college would say. This one's going 2x the velocity. This goes 1 unit of velocity. It's the other way around. Okay, so this goes 1 unit of velocity. This one goes 2 units of velocity. So it's completely inverse to the mass. He's saying this is only going 1.4, okay, which is only 0.7 of the momentum. So if it's going 1.4 and it's still only, and it's one mass, it's obviously lost momentum. And so then when it hits on the receiving spring, it's going to compress the spring the same amount, even though it's 1.4 of the velocity. So the spring doesn't even compress the same amount. So his argument is that a two velocity object hit into a spring won't compress the spring either. Because see, if I had a two velocity, so he's saying 1.4 is going into the spring, and that creates proportional compression in the spring, the same compression. 1.4 creates the same. So his argument is that if I doubled the velocity, if I actually did throw the 8-pound bowling ball going twice as fast, that I'll compress the spring more. So if I did double the velocity of something and have its mass, that it'll compress the spring more. Somehow he'll have extra energy. Okay, so that's what he's arguing. And Professor Lewin's experiment demonstrates exactly the opposite, in the sense that if I put a spring on these objects, it was when I converted a fast object into a slow object that I got the increase in the momentum. So it's ironic, that the slow thing ends up with more energy. Hitting light things into heavy things gave me the more energy. So, obviously there is some contradiction in the record. Yeah, so anyway. I'll be done with this soon. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, shit. All right, well, anyway, Gary's false claim that the red object, okay, blah, blah, blah. He has recently said this is reality. All right, so let's see what he's saying. Therefore, it cannot possibly be expected to compress the receiving spring with extra energy. There's no extra. I don't claim the existence of the extra energy, so that's just nonsense. It does not have. If it has less, then it can't. Then again, you're arguing that the twice as fast object compresses the spring more, and we don't have any evidence of that. We don't have any evidence that if I throw a half mass object into gravity and it goes 4 times higher, and when it comes down, that it makes a hole that's 4 times as big, except a clay experiment. Yeah, but not any other experiment. Anyway, I expect Gary's intentional misdescription of what happened. So again, he keeps talking about some sort of intent. I'm perpetrating some lie. No, I sincerely believe what I state, and this is a lie to say I am deluding or tricking or fooling anybody. You may call me an idiot and a moron for believing something. Go ahead and do that. But to say I'm lying about any of it is just disgustingly poor form. You have no evidence. I don't believe completely in Newton's mechanics. I believe Newton was correct. I believe Leibniz was a religious kook. That's what I actually believe. Anyway, he has recently said this is reality. Less than a week ago, he said this. So it's not as if Gary is merely saying what their theory says. Well, I am merely stating that part of this, I don't disagree with all physics. Okay, no, this is Gary's theory and simply does not happen. So again, he keeps saying it's my theory when clearly it's a theory all the physicists have. So when you do prove they are all wrong, I'm just saying for consistency, you should nag all of them about their wrongness and how they're teaching students incorrectly. That's what I would ask you to do out of consistency, is to use and say they've been lying all this time. Why don't you do that too? Why don't you all call them liars, because they must know the truth. This 1.4 thing wasn't hard to find out, so why have they been lying about it for 300 years? I confess I am silly for not having yet uploaded my far better demonstrations that will convince anyone rational. So again, he's going to convince all the physicists that their whole conservation of momentum theory was nonsense. that physics basic claim that half the mass object going 2x faster off the same spring is simply 100% incorrect. So again, he's saying what conventional physics says about momentum is 100% incorrect. So there's really no point in reading all this crap, right? It's just more of the same lie, blah, 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 blah. Let's see, apologies for my reply has ended up rather a mess. Though trying to rush, I've got to go. So he wrote all this while he had to get somewhere. He's got some important appointment, and that's why he has to give a brief answer. And so instead of answering the question, he just keeps reasserting that I'm lying or cheating somehow. And it's already been a well-established fact that the 1.4 theory exists, and he's just going to establish that all the physicists are right and it's 1.4. When, of course, none of the physicists believe it's 1.4, as far as I can tell. So we've been tricked into believing something happens which does not by Gary. So again, not by Gary, but by I was taught. Okay? I was taught conservation of momentum. I believe it because I've seen it and they've told me it's the way it works. So it's just too silly. So will he use this same demeanor in approaching all the physicists who have lied about kinetic energy and lied, not telling us that it's conservation of kinetic energy and that momentum is the thing you can destroy? All right, anyway, too silly. So the experiment I am interested in, the fact is I might do this one because I was thinking of different ways you could do it. And this is just the Professor Lewin experiment, the increased your momentum experiment. Again, it's clearly the experiment's demonstrating an increase in momentum from no apparent source. So, so the idea is that the all right, so the idea is you have the one mass object, you have a spring on it, then you crash it into the two mass object, and so this has, say, a momentum of 100, and then after you crash it into the two mass object ends up with a momentum in this direction of 130. Okay. Now, yes, 30 goes back this way, okay, but 130 goes that way. So you've taken this way of 100 and turned it into this way of 130. And the implication would be is I can just put a 4 here, okay, and now I can change it into 170. So I went from 100 to 130 to 170, and all I've done is move one object, and I'm making extra energy. I mean, that's huge. So the idea would be is just to suspend all these things from like rafters, okay? So they're all just, a couple of inches apart, say 3 inches. So this one's 3 inches from this one's 3 inches, and I was thinking I could just use bottles, right, with springs. So, and then I can fill the bottles with different amounts of fluid to make them heavier and heavier. And then I just have to lift one of the bottles, let it bang into this bottle, and let it bang into that bottle, and then let it bang into the next bottle and the next bottle. And if I can get up to, say, 20 pounds at the end, I need to get to 30, right? I think 30 is the number. Well, let's see, 4, 8, that gets me 170. Then I go to, so if if I start off with just 1 pound, then double to 2, then double that to 4, then double it to 8 pounds, and then 16. Yeah, that'd probably be the heaviest I'd want to play with, because that's getting into over a gallon. But all you have to do is go 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, and I should have, I think well, anyway, yeah, it goes 170. Let's see, so it goes 100, 130, 170, then it's like 230, and then it goes to 300. Yeah. So you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so the 8 would only be 4. So 16 is where you'd have to go to get the 3 times the energy. So I can 3x the energy by just going through this process. And yeah, it's pretty huge. And then again, like I said, I can use this 300 to start 3 of these, right? So then I can take the 300 and bang it into 3 different systems. You know, they're doing this, and move all of those, start all of those making more energy. You know, so it'd be a, you know, perpetual free energy machine. In theory. Obviously something has to be wrong, and I just going by the Professor Lewin experiment, it's on an air track, it's kind of, you know, clinical. It's hard to deny it's hard to state there's a flaw in it somewhere, but clearly it doesn't make any sense. So I haven't heard any feedback at all on that, so we'll just have to, I'll have to just wait till we can do that experiment, I guess, because that's interesting, frankly. It's just, it's, I'm sorry, I don't have that clip readily available, and I don't feel like finding it right now. I mean, it's in the previous video, but there's just no denying that if you can transfer 2/3 of the velocity to an object that weighs twice as much, you've obviously increased the momentum. And where'd you get it? You know, except from the spring. You must have compressed the spring for free. And now the spring's going to uncompress, and you're getting that free energy. That's the only way to explain it. So anyway, so far. It's the only way I can think to explain it so far. But we'll get to that later. Something to look forward to. That'll be interesting. And of course, Stephen's proof of the 1.4 theory, whew, glad to see it. Yeah, can't wait. Because now he can argue that regular physics is full of shit. So he'll be on my side now. So this has been a DraftPhysics.com video presentation.